Welcome to Caffeinated Advice. My name is Jay Johns. And today I kind of want to dive into a topic that I envision is probably going to last over quite a few editions. I don't think this is going to get covered in just this one sort of conversation. But speaking of, got to get my beverage ready. I want to talk today about imposter syndrome. It's a big topic. And the reason why I want to talk about it is, yes, there's a lot of people that I know of in the entrepreneurship space who sort of suffer with it. There's a lot of people in the creative space in general that suffer with it. And I was someone who suffered with it for many, many years, like a really long time. And so essentially what I want to do before I dive too deep into all this is I want to sort of just showcase my story as much as possible. And hopefully that can help somebody else and at least maybe put someone maybe on the path or have another sort of voice out there that you can kind of look to for some help or some suggestions. So, I think as far back as I can remember, I've been someone with, varying levels of imposter syndrome. And I can remember even, when I was in middle school, I think it was, I was a part of this sort of, the school I was at had this really interesting sort of thing where it was like, there was sort of like a sport, like, sporting events. We'd like travel to different schools and compete against each other. Well, they had a version of that for the arts. They would have these little competitions for um, people who were doing hand drawing stuff, people who were doing music, people who were doing, it was like a big sort of couple hour event that would happen. Um, you know, it's like once a week or something like that. I don't remember if it was in the summertime or what, but it was something I was a part of, and I sort of was drawn to building and creating art and sketching and things like that. My mom put me into this program, and it was then is when I really started to do, like, really aware of the comparison that I do for myself versus others. And I could quickly tell that I was not as talented as everyone else, right? Like, I sort of felt like I shouldn't even be there. Does that make sense? And I think that there's situations that occur like that in all facets of life. I think that people feel that way. For instance, when I first got into entrepreneurship, like a year into it or whatever, I started going to this local event that Fort Wayne had at the time called 1 Million Cups. And it was designed to kind of get entrepreneurs to talk to each other and kind of, the notion that experiences are probably going to be very similar. If one entrepreneur has a certain kind of problem, chances are another entrepreneur has either dealt with that problem or is also experiencing that problem. And so, get everyone together and build a little community. I felt like I shouldn't have even been there. Like, I would sort of force myself to go because I knew that I could get some valuable information going there. But I was not one to, try to chime in whenever they would have sort of like community questions and things like that. So I just didn't feel like the things that I was offering would have been valuable. And these are just, like I said, true to life experiences that I have. There's many more than just those two, but I think those are two that at least bear the point, right? I would even, I've only mentioned this to a few people in my life, but I had this weird association with myself where I kind of even compared myself to a werewolf. It was really weird. I described it as, so let me go back to that, but I described it as that I was pulling the veil over everyone's eyes and that I was sort of somehow tricking everyone into thinking that I was, likable or whatever, whatever it is. Like if there was any kind of positive feelings towards me, I had somehow tricked you, right? And it wasn't just specific to types of achievements or skills. It was sort of in general that I had somehow tricked you into liking me. And I sort of just lived that way for the longest time. And um, so that's when I would start to describe it to the few people that I even mentioned this to. Um, I described it as me being a werewolf in a lot of ways, where um, the part that you see is like the human form, but that's just sort of an alter ego. It's not like the real form is the the monstrous beast underneath. And I don't know why I was giving myself that distinction. I'm sure that there's a lot of um, things from, if you want to think about like a childhood perspective and all that, which we don't have to get into here. Um, but I think that there's a lot of people who have varying degrees of imposter syndrome. And I think that there's levels and ways that you can sort of mitigate it for yourself and make it easier for yourself to um, have more confidence in your work, to start asking for more money when it comes to your work, whether that's for individual purchases or for salary purposes. I think that, again, I'm just sort of giving you a quick overview of my story. And it, who knows? I don't know how often I'm going to talk about this, but I've been going through a few year sort of journey for myself of a lot of introspection and trying to make things sort of get out of my head a lot more. Um, I was someone who didn't realize that I had a lot of anxiety, and I didn't actually know that I had some depressionary stuff going on. I don't know why I'm downplaying that. I had, but um, I just didn't recognize those feelings as what they were, and that when I finally started like seeking help and just trying to talk to people about what was going on, and just be like that decision came from being 100% truthful with myself. And I was living this because I was sort of feeling like I was tricking everyone. Made like this persona, at least I thought I was, that everyone was seeing that wasn't the real me. And so I would start making choices and stuff like that based on who this persona was rather than what I really wanted or what I felt or what was important to me. And through this couple year journey, part of that was figuring out what is it that what is, the know thyself moment here. What if I were to be asked certain questions, what is my true feelings on it? What is my true, you know, acknowledging if you're scared about something, acknowledging if you're nervous about something, acknowledging if you're sad, if you're angry, if you're, like, um, I think that that's something that really helped me. I wouldn't say that I've fully overcome the notion of imposter syndrome, but I'm definitely a lot farther along than I used to be. And I can start giving you uh, uh, some tips that worked for me, and I hope that they work for you. So a big one is just knowing, like, being as honest with yourself. I have this theory, and I'm not a psychologist or anyone who really deals with this stuff, but my theory is that the imposter syndrome thing comes from somehow you wanting to control an outcome, uh, you wanting a certain kind of job, a certain kind of person to like your work, a certain kind of um, status, that there's something that you are trying to acquire. And because, and as on your way to that thing, that status, that sort of recognition, it doesn't feel earned in some way. And it's really hard to explain, I think. But I think there's something to do as I'm trying to unpack my life and unpack, you know, were there reasons why I had these feelings of being an imposter? I think it was really nervous about who the true Jay Johns was, not wanting people to not like that version of who I was, and being very nervous about ridicule, being very nervous about judgment. And what's fascinating, and it's borderline cliche, but what's fascinating is once you really are honest with yourself, once you really are going after goals that you really want and you truly believe in, any kind of negative opinion just doesn't really hit your radar as much. It becomes very evident when negative things are said about you, when you know that you're somehow not, when you know that you're making choices that aren't specific to you, right? If you are being some sort of an imposter, right? If you are, and some weird, here's a weird example that I'm just coming up with right now. You might hear my kids bouncing around upstairs. If you do, sorry about that. But um, a strange example might be that, you know, you really want to be a 3D modeler in the game design industry, but it was a more steady option to become a mechanic. I don't know. I'm just throwing something out there. Um, you might feel like any kind of achievement you make as a mechanic is unfounded, that it's not really real, right? But I don't think that's true. I think you are still achieving these things. People don't just hand out recognition for no reason, right? I think that's one thing that you, as the person with an imposter syndrome feeling, needs to recognize. People are not complimenting you for the sake of compliments. You know, you've done a good job somewhere. You know, your work was worth seeing and was appreciated and was valued. And um, so part of that is understanding what is it that you want to achieve in life. And mainly, I think the bigger thing is not trying to control where that leads, right? Enjoying the process of what you're doing, whatever it is that you're doing your best to be happy with the now, right? Yes, it would have been great if, name whatever it is, right? It would have been great if I lived in, you know, Florida or Arizona or, Seattle versus, like the potential frozen tundra of the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, right? But there's, and this is something that I've also been trying to do a lot also too, is just trying to find things that you're appreciative about and happy about right now. Don't live so far in the future. That's one of the problems I was having. I was living so far in the future. I was not taking a step back and just saying, wow, look at what I've accomplished. Look what I've learned. Look at what um, the steps that I took, and being proud of myself for doing those things. And if you can do that and you can legitimately reduce the amount of time that you're comparing yourself to other people in your same field, your life is going to change. And I am living proof of that. It changes because you can't compare yourself to somebody else because they're on a totally different path than you. There's people who are going to have way more, natural ability at whatever it is that you're trying to do. But they still might not be as successful as you because for a myriad of reasons. I mean, I could list a bunch of reasons, but it's not about natural ability. It's about doing your best to become as good as you can become. It's not about how you compared today to somebody else. It's how did you compare today to you yesterday. That's where it comes from. That's where peace of mind comes from for me, is how am I comparing myself to yesterday, to myself to last month, to myself to last year? Man, it has been such a shift in perspective. It's been such a shift in my sort of my overall happiness levels, you know? And it's just a matter of, okay, let me sidestep. Another big thing that you really need to do, and I don't know how long I've been going here, so I might stop this sooner than later. So I don't really want these to go on for a long time. But one of the major things that I believe that you should be doing to avoid the imposter feeling is, oh man, I just lost my train of thought. Let's get something to drink here. Here we go. I'm back. Is to um, do your best to not be afraid of failing. Look at failure, like literally looking at a failure as an opportunity. The imposter syndrome thing, it feels like for me, that would really spark up if something good happened. And I would feel like this doesn't make sense because of all these bad things, right? The problem with that, though, is that all the bad things are giving you learning lessons for the good things. You're probably going to hear me say this so many times, but trying to get yourself in a place where you are as comfortable as possible with failure, or at least just trying stuff to see where it lands. Man, your whole world opens up. It's like, hey, I gave that a shot, it didn't work, moving on. And to just learn what you learned from it and then move on, that perspective totally changed everything for me. It was before, because I would sort of like have this mental checklist of all of my failings, all the things that I might have done wrong, all of the potential ways that I might have, um, rubbed off the wrong way to somebody during a conversation, like all the little things that, yeah, I mean, you just have to learn from them, right? It's not something that no one else ultimately is keeping this big tally in their head of you, except for you. And as long as you're learning from it and you are doing your best to just, I think people who are willing to just constantly try things and see where they go, what they can learn from it, um, are those are the people who are really going to make the most change in the world, right? Those are the people who are going to stand out. They just are. And if you are an entrepreneur, you need to stand out somehow. For what, in some capacity, you need to be a little bit different than somebody else who does a similar thing to you. And I don't know, I feel like I'm rambling a little bit now, but like I said, this is sort of my first go around at sort of talking about this in a situation that's going to just be out there. And I know that it's going to take more than just one conversation. My hope is that I can give some insight into other people who might be feeling this way. Um, Let them know that they're not alone, but you definitely can allow it to not take over your whole world. Um, and believe people when they say that you are doing a good job. Believe people when you are recognized for your work. You don't have to necessarily, be braggadocious about it, and you can still be humble, but to completely dismiss them doesn't make any sense. Why would they lie? They have no reason to lie. So Oh, I wanted to mention that one book that I actually ended up reading a few years ago that really was part of the notion of being truthful with myself. Um, whoops, and going down that path. There's this really interesting book called "I Hope I Screw This Up," and it's by Kyle Cease, last name Cease. I think that's how you might pronounce it, is Cease. Now, I ended up listening to it in the audio version, but man, it really sort of unlocked something for me. It's this notion that if you are vulnerable, right? If you, instead of trying to be this persona like what I was doing, acknowledge when you might feel embarrassed, acknowledge when you're not really sure what the answer is, just acknowledge what the truth is, right? That's what I took from it, is be truthful, be honest about it, and allow other people in, you know? Um, that is what's done the most to mitigate my imposter syndrome. As I mentioned, I'm not fully out of the woods. I think there's still times that I feel that way, but um, I don't know if you're hearing my dryer dingling along saying that it was all done, but um, I'll just bring it up anyway. If you didn't hear it, now you know. Hey, my dryer's done. Um, maybe it was my washer. Either way, I um, I want everyone to succeed. I just do. I don't want you to sort of have all of this negative stuff lingering around you. And I would consider imposter syndrome a negative stuff. So do your best to be as truthful to yourself. Do your best to not compare yourself to others. And just put stuff out there and learn from it and be okay with whatever the result is. Don't try to force things to happen. If you have any questions, concerns, make sure you reach out to me, because I would like to have conversations with people about this. I would like to continue to, you know, just be an open book as much as I can about my experiences and helping other people through theirs. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon.